Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of the Pewter Report podcast and pewterreport.com. It is a Thursday edition of the show, and of course, we are saving the best for last. It's been a week full of guests, and we're happy to bring on another one for this show as we talk about a very serious topic that Bucs fans will be discussing from now up until the start of the regular season, and that is the quarterback competition or comparison, in this case, between Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. Who's going to win the job? What do they have to do in order to be the starter for your Tampa Bay Buccaneers? We're going to get into all of that and more. I'm your host, Matt Matera, and joined with me today is Dustin Ludke from Dynasty Pros Fantasy Football. Very excited to have Dustin on the show. I met him at the NFL Combine, chatted from there, and he told me that he's an expert when it comes to the quarterback. So I thought it'd be perfect to have this man on for the Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask comparison. Dustin, thank you so much for joining the show, and how are you doing?
Matt, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. It's been really busy. We were just talking. It's been super busy since the Combine. It was Combine, then free agency, and then draft. So I was in Indianapolis with you at the Combine, was down in Kansas City at the draft, and now it's just it should be slow in the off season, but it's not. It's it's that time of year where people want to hear about rookies. They want to hear about who the starter is for certain teams. They want to know their sleepers. They want to know all this fantasy and relevant football stuff. We're coming up on June 1st, so we could see some cuts. Dalvin Cook could get cut. Does he impact someone's situation? So it's been great. I'm loving it. Obviously, I love doing this as a part-time thing. Hopefully someday I'll go full-time, but it's a passion of mine. I love football. As you can tell behind me, I'm a huge football guy. So it's been great. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. And yeah, you talk about players getting cut. Bucs fans will remember very, very easily and not too long ago that Leonard Fournette, he got cut by the Jaguars, and that's how he ended up coming over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But Leonard's no longer in Tampa Bay. Rachaad White is a guy on a lot of people's fantasy football radar. We'll get into Rachaad White a little bit later. Of course, this topic is about Baker and Kyle Trask. Before we get into that, though, Dustin, just tell everybody a little bit about what you do over at Dynasty Pros and, where they can find you on your social media.
Yeah, so I'm our content director at Dynasty Pros, so I basically oversee all of our written content. We do IDP, so individual defensive players. We do Devy stuff. We do Dynasty. We do redraft. Work with the great team. Bob Miller's our CEO. We have a great team that does podcasts. So we're trying to be your one-stop shop for all things fantasy football related and generally football related. We have Andrew Hall writing about NFL All Day, which is the NFT platform they have where you can buy and sell moments and you can play fantasy with that. You can check me out on Twitter at the DUnit13, so THEDUNIT 13. That's going to be big. We'll talk about this beautiful, lovely banner behind me in a little bit later, but that's where you can find all my stuff. I drop articles. I also do write for Dynasty Nerds and QB Lists. You can check out my stuff. So Twitter's the best place to find all my stuff. I just dropped a Dalton Kincaid article that's kind of making the rounds right now. So anywhere and anywhere. And I'll be on podcasts. I don't have my own. I just do guest spots like this. So it's a great place to see where I'm at. If you think I'm not a complete idiot and make some sense, maybe that's where you can find where I'm going to be next. So
make sure you give Dustin a follow. Appreciate everybody watching the show right now. Got a lot of people in the chat, of course, already going back and forth about Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. So if you have a question, feel free to super chat us. If you give us a super chat, we'll make sure we get your comment up right away. We'll get to a couple of questions as well, as Christopher Cole says. Good evening, everyone. All right, so Baker Mayfield versus Kyle Trask. Kyle Trask, of course, is the incumbent. Not that he's been the starter, but he's been in Tampa Bay. I do want to start with Baker Mayfield, though, because there's obviously a lot more of a history with him. And, for both guys, really, whether it's Baker, whether it's Kyle, you're coming into a situation that is quite interesting. There's no replacing Tom Brady. I don't think anyone wants to sign up and be like, yeah, I'll replace Tom Brady. That's not ideal for anybody. But on the flip side, you look at this offense and new offensive coordinator. We could talk about that too. But at the end of the day, you still have Mike Evans. You still have Chris Godwin, a lot of appealing wide receivers and offensive weapons to throw to. So the big thing with Baker, curious to get your thoughts, Dustin, just overall, we know the time frame of Baker, number one pick. had that great season with Cleveland, led them to the playoffs, got to the second round. Then it just seemed like that torn rotator cuff. It obviously took a turn for the worse for him, and never kind of panned out after that, going to the Panthers and then the Rams. Do you see with Baker's game, can he get back to that Baker Mayfield that he was a couple of seasons ago, or has that ship sailed? No pun intended to the Bucs.
I mean, this is his best opportunity, right? He went to the Rams last year after being on the Panthers and not doing anything. Went to the Rams, who still had decent receivers. Obviously didn't have Cooper Kupp, didn't have the weapons he's used to. Yes, it's in the realm of possibilities, but I don't think he gets back there. He's 28, which isn't old, especially for a quarterback. He's going into his 6th year. I just think the mental game has gotten to him, this bouncing around on different teams. It's his 4th team in basically 2 years. The struggles he's had, even when he was good in Cleveland, he was still just, in my mind, a marginally good quarterback, right? In 2020, he threw 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. But the year before that, he was 22 and 21. So 22 touchdowns, 21. It is his last opportunity, as Kyle's saying there, and it's his only shot. Now, he does benefit from having a great team around him, right? Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are still up there as probably one of the top 5 wide receiver duos in the league. Rashad White had a great receiving profile coming out of college. Cade Otton is a good tight end who's young, who has some versatility there. They still have Russell Gage. They got some other pieces there. So this is his best shot, but I personally don't think he's the starter week 1. And if he is, it's a very, very, very short leash. And he may not have that. He may not have that job 4 weeks into the season.
So are you not putting too much stock into the fact that he just has experience as a starter, the chip on his shoulder? That's kind of been the MO of Baker's career for his whole time. So you didn't like him really like before he had and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but you weren't a big fan of him even before his quote unquote breakout year in Cleveland?
No, I mean, I thought coming out of the draft, he was just okay to me. Like he was an okay quarterback. I think the problem with Baker is, yes, he plays with that chip on his shoulder, but I think that puts him in bad situations where he relies too much and goes, yeah, I can make that throw, when he really can't. We've seen it with other guys like Carson Wentz, those guys who just go, I can make this throw. Jameis Winston, I can make the throw. I know I'm good enough to make it. And they're really just not. And there's not, that self-realization isn't there. I think when you look at someone like Tom Brady, who had that self-realization down, like, I know the throws I can and can't make, and I'm going to make the throws I can make and not try to force things. That's why Brady didn't throw a ton of interceptions. If you look at guys like Kirk Cousins, understands what he can and can't do, and goes, okay, I know I can't make the throw, so I'm just going to throw it away, or I'm going to tuck the ball and run, or I'm going to go to my next option. Baker, I think, just goes, and now he's at this point where he goes, I need to make this play. Mm-hmm. And you put that with, I can make that play, and that overconfidence puts him in, I think, in bad situations. We saw the last year. He only had 10 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. So it's not like he was lighting the world on fire in his time.
He had the big moment. Yes, he had the big moment, right? A long way.
And that was the thing, right? Well, the big moment was how he came in. He's been here for 3 days. Yes, because that's the experience, right? Once you know how to play in the NFL and you understand offenses, you can go in and play with I don't want to say short rest, but minimal time with the team, because they just simplify everything and go, this is what you can do. Okay, do that. He got brought in to obviously, I think, push Kyle Trask, and there is a good shot. I say it's 50-50 right now, but if I'm going to put my chips in, I'm going to put it on Kyle Trask to be the starter. But I just think Baker has that little bit of too much overconfidence in his abilities, and I think he's pressuring too hard to make the plays to try to win the job, and I think that's going to put him in a bad spot.
Is there any validity to the fact that Baker played through the injury, and then the Browns were kind of like, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to go in another direction, going for Deshaun Watson. There are some people that feel that Carolina and what they ran on offense wasn't necessarily suited to Baker's game. It was never really a right fit, but the Browns are like, hey, you want to take him? Sure, fine, screw it. We'll give it to you. Because, I believe Cleveland still ended up paying like a majority or at least like half of his contract. So Cleveland was just ready to get him out of town. And sure, Carolina thought that they could do something with Baker, but sometimes it has to be the right fit on both sides. Is there any credibility to that?
And there is, right? And fit does matter, right? When we look at quarterbacks across the board, coaching scheme and fit does matter. Look at someone like Josh Rosen, was a top first-round pick, top 10
Former
pick.
Buccaneer great, yeah.
Like, just didn't catch on in Carolina, in Arizona, and then got bounced around because it just wasn't the right fit. Look at someone like Mac Jones, not the greatest quarterback, but goes to New England, has a really good rookie year. Then next year they bring in no offensive coordinator or 2 offensive coordinators, and he has a down year because the fit just didn't match. So I agree though. I don't think Carolina was the right fit for Baker. I think LA was a better fit, but I don't think it was right. I don't know if Tampa Bay is the right fit for Baker. I don't think he's the precision passer that Brady was. I don't think he can shuck it down the field well. So what's his niche? Like, what's Baker really good at? In my mind, it's nothing really. Like, he's okay at a lot of things, and he's got experience, and you hope that you can recapture some of that magic. They're going to have to really, if he's the starter, they're really going to have to tailor that offense around him. So I would see a lot of intermediate passes, quick read stuff that it's, here's your first read. It's a hot route. Go that way. If not, you throw it out of bounds type deal. I don't see him going through progressions, going, Evans is covered, Godwin's covered, Cotton's covered. Okay, let me throw it to Russell Gage. He's just not going to do that. I expect a lot of running the ball with Rachaad White. So it probably is a good fit, but I think they are better off going with Trask, who has a little more of the upside, who can chuck the ball down the field and fits better with the skill weapons they have.
Very interesting, because I think if you polled a lot of people, and it's still very split overall, and of course, in the Tampa area, you have some people that have their allegiance to the Florida Gators, so they're going to ride with Kyle Trask. But I think the caveat in all of this is that there's a whole new offense this year. So when you're talking about chucking the ball down the field, that was definitely the MO of Bruce Arians when he was here, and obviously Byron Leftwich, who was a protege of BA, but BA's still in the building, but he's just as, he's there just to oversee everybody, have a good time, make some drinks for general manager Jason Lay. And Byron Leftwich isn't here anymore. I think what kind of helps Baker a little bit in this situation, and granted, he wasn't with LA for crazy long, but Dave Canales was with the Seattle Seahawks for a very long time, and some of the Seahawks offense and some of what he learned was from the offensive coordinator from that he worked with in Seattle that went over to LA. So I think what is going to help Baker a little bit is he kind of knows this offense already better than Kyle Trask, just because he played in it in LA. And this is going to be a lot more quarterback friendly. You still got to hold on to the ball without question and not throw it away. And also the mobility of the quarterback. Listen, no one's going to confuse Baker Mayfield for, Lamar Jackson. That's never going to happen. But the mobility of Baker, I think, can kind of help him out a little bit, because that was something that was missing from the Bucs offense just in the Tom Brady era in general. And, of course, it worked out. They won a Super Bowl and won the division the next year. But they could never use the element of surprise of, play action rollout or anything like that, or at least not for too long, because Tom Brady is just not mobile. That's what it is when he's age 45. But Baker can kind of do that. So does Baker have a little bit of an advantage, not just because he's mobile, but because he's playing in an offense that he at least saw last year in LA that Dave Canales is going to implement to a degree here in Tampa?
Yeah, and Dave Canales comes from Seattle, where he was there for since 2010. He's been there forever.
Long time.
And if you look at what they did last year with Geno Smith, that's a great comparison for Baker. I think Geno and Baker compare a lot. And obviously, Geno's considerably older, but don't have that down the field, right? That chuck it down the field. They have a little bit of mobility, but not a ton, but enough where you can roll out. So I think we could see a very similar offense to what we saw in Seattle last year. And you're right, it is kind of similar to what he ran with the Rams last year. So it's going to be similar, and they do fit that. But I think Kyle Trask is just as good in those areas as Baker Mayfield is. So he does fit into that system, and it's going to be a better fit. And that I'm curious to see what the system runs with and what the offense looks like now that they got the new offensive coordinator. And I think it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be those short intermediate passes. It's going to be a lot of run game, right? If you look at Seattle, they ran the ball a ton last year. They're going to allow Baker or Kyle Trask to maybe run some play action a little more that we didn't see with Brady, right? Everyone's faster than Brady, right? Yeah. I'm faster than Brady. It's not hard to be faster than Tom Brady. So Baker does have that upside, and so does Trask. So I think it was a smart signing for the Buccaneers to bring in Baker, because I think him and Trask are very similar quarterbacks. So whoever starts, it's the same offense. It's not like you're getting a Lamar Jackson and then you have Kyle Trask, right? Where it's One's a heavy rushing quarterback, one's not. You can run the same offense with both of them. So I think it was a smart signing by them.
We'll talk more about Kyle Trask in just a minute, but if Baker does win this job and we're not anointing him the starting position, what does Baker have to prove in training camp? What, if you're going to make the case for Baker, is there anything, I know you said he doesn't do anything well, but is there anything you could point to where it's like, if Baker can get this together, he can go out and be the starter? If you're Team Baker, what's your argument for him?
He's got to do, I think, three things. One, he's going to have to show that he understands an NFL playbook, right? He has to rely on that experience of, they go, whatever these crazy, spider 2 wide banana, right? They're going to go, okay, that's this, this, and this. He's going to have to show that. He's going to have to show that he can lead the locker room in the huddle, because I think that's where a lot of young quarterbacks struggle. They're just not very boisterous guys. And I think that's something that Baker does excel at. Like, he's a energetic, boisterous guy. What he has to learn is how to adapt his leadership style to the team, right? We see it on the Browns. He was, he was on the Panthers. He's headbutting guys with helmets and he doesn't have one on. Like, some guys are going to love that. Some guys are going to hate that. And you have to really read the room. So he has to be able to do that. And then he has to not turn over the ball. And that's my biggest concern. And I know there was an article you guys put out on Pewter Report about, right, whoever turns over the ball the least probably gets a starter. So Baker really has to show that in training camp and preseason that he can't turn over the ball. If he starts turnovering the ball, I think he's done.
Yeah, I do see a situation. I do feel as if Baker can at least throw it down the field more. You want to throw it to the right color jersey, or practice jersey in this case during training camp. And I think he will push the envelope a little bit more than Kyle Trask has so far in his career in Tampa Bay. I do think it is a bit interesting for Trask. He was quarterback 3 here in Tampa. Like, it's one thing you're not going to play because Tom Brady's here, but he didn't even beat out Blaine Gabbert. So to jump from QB3 to QB1, I think is a huge thing. And for Baker, while he can push the envelope, I just do see the situation in my head where he comes in first couple of practices, and Baker, for whatever reason, reminds me a little bit of Brett Favre in the Wrangler jeans commercials, where he's like running around everywhere and just chucking it. And I could see him the first 2 practices throwing like 3 or 4 interceptions in practice. And it's like, where are you going with the ball? And there's a fine line between, okay, it's practice, I got to see what I can do, what I can get away with, and what I would never try. And then just head scratching plays that you don't even understand why he threw it in the first place. And you can't win the starting job, whether it's for the Bucs or any quarterback competition. You're not going to win the starting job in the first week of practice.
Nope.
But you could lose the starting job
quick
in the first week of practice with all those mistakes. I'm glad you said that, Baker. While he's a bit of a rah-rah guy, he energizes the group. I know one way I like to get energized is by having a Celsius energy drink. Make Celsius energy drinks your number 1 pick. They have a variety of flavors. You see it on the screen there. Their Oasis Vibe is one of the newest flavors they have. Can't go wrong with the sparkling lemon lime or sparkling orange either. My personal favorite is the Arctic Vibe. I've been drinking a lot of cucumber lime and strawberry lemonade as well. Sparkling watermelon too. So many great different flavors. 0 sugar. You don't get that post energy drink crash or jitters that you might get with another product out there. So make sure you go out and get a Celsius. If you don't know where to find one, go to the Celsius store locator, punch in your address, and it will give you the most accurate location that you can find at your local Walmart, Target, 7-Eleven convenience store, or your bodega, as I like to say. So go on out there, get a Celsius energy drink, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com. All right, now I guess technically the longest tenured quarterback on the Bucs roster right now, Kyle Trask, going into his 3rd year. And the advantage that Kyle Trask does have, to a degree, Baker's obviously coming in. He's never worked with these guys before. He's been in the building. He's used to the facility. While Baker might have the advantage with knowing the offense, the wide receivers, the offensive linemen, running back, and tight ends, they're all learning the offense at the same level that Kyle Trask is, too. But I do wonder, Dustin, when it comes to what we were talking about before the Celsius energy drink commercial of he's not just going from 2 to 1, he's going from 3 to 1. So I'm just curious in these 2 years what Tampa Bay hasn't or has seen from him that they said, all right, let's bring in Baker and not just automatically make Kyle Trask the number one guy. I also think we were talking about this a little bit on yesterday's show. The only reps that Kyle Trask has gotten in the NFL was a Week 18 game against the Atlanta Falcons. I believe he went 3 for 9. I think the Bucs completely missed the boat on just giving him more playing time. There was no reason to have Blaine Gabbert play that game. But curious, you can go back to Florida if you watched him there or just the preseason that he's been involved. But what about Kyle Trask makes you think that he's going to win this job?
For me, it's his athletic ability, right? I think people forget that Kyle Trask was a second-round pick, right? If he was drafted the second round this year, you'd be going, oh, he's going to be the starter sooner rather than later, right?
Yeah.
Right, you look at Will Levis. He was drafted the second round. Everybody's like, oh, he's going to take over for Tannehill in Tennessee. Kyle Trask was also 4th in the Heisman voting that year. He had Devonta Smith, who won.
Yeah.
You had Trevor Lawrence, who was the first overall pick. You had Mac Jones. And then you had Kyle Trask. And then 5th was Najee Harris. So, he was 4th in the Heisman voting against some really good, tough competition. He had a really good college career. What I like about Kyle Trask looking at his college numbers is his completion percentage. He averaged 67.9% completion percentage in college. That's pretty good. Now, he didn't have a ton of touchdowns. His last year in Florida, he had 43 and only 25 the year before. But he's still a 6'5", 236. He's a big player. It's not like he's a small guy. I think what the Buccaneers haven't seen from him is working with the first team offense.
Mm-hmm.
What I know of Tom Brady is that he's I want to say selfish, but he's
deliberate.
He's deliberate and very it's my team. I'm going to get all the reps. If he wants the reps, he's going to get them. And I think he was very protective of those reps, especially in Tampa Bay, knowing that it was the twilight of his career of, I'm going to take all these first team reps so they don't see what they have in Kyle Trask. Now, right, when it comes to Kyle Trask and Blaine Gabbert, I think it was a comfortability with Blaine Gabbert fit the mold of Tom Brady. So if Tom Brady would have went down, they don't have to change the offense for Blaine Gabbert, where I think they would have to tweak the offense to really fit Kyle Trask's skills. And I think that's why he was 3rd instead of 2nd. I think he wins out because I don't think Kyle Trask turns over the ball as much as Baker Mayfield. You guys had that article. We talked about Baker possibly turning it over. If you look at college, right, since Kyle Trask has no NFL experience, we take out Baker's NFL experience. We just look at college. Kyle Trask, 27 games, 15 interceptions, 0 fumbles. Baker, 48 games, 30 interceptions, 0 fumbles. So in attempts, it was basically Trask was turning it over 1.86% of the time. Baker was turning over 2.95. So almost 2% higher, 1% higher really is what Baker's turning over the ball. Baker in the NFL has 27 touchdowns and 21 interceptions over his career, and not to mention 15 fumbles. And I think that's the stat that doesn't get talked about with Baker is that he fumbles the ball quite a bit. Mm-hmm. If he can't, that's where I'm worried about. I'm not worried about necessarily interceptions. I think that's a possibility, but I don't see that with Trask. Now, granted, we haven't seen Trask in the NFL, so I don't know how he's adjusted to the speed. I don't know how he's adjusted to the pressure he's going to see, the blitz packages, how he reads defenses. But just looking at college numbers, he was the more efficient protector of the ball than Baker was in college.
This is a little bit outside the box, but if you were going to put Kyle Trask in this year's draft class with everyone that just got selected, where do you have him? I don't know if he's necessarily number 1 or 2, but is he in that cat? Does he go before or after Will Levis? I saw someone had a question about that.
I think he goes before Will Levis. Didn't have a great 40 time, so it was 5 seconds. He's pretty slow comparatively. He doesn't have the arm that Will Levis has, but I think that's where people are going to start talking about when you talk about someone who's in the Heisman finalist, he definitely goes above Will Levis. Like, you're talking about a guy that's up there. If you look at where Mac Jones got drafted, right, compared to Kyle Trask, like, I think that's where we see it. And somewhere in that second round, I think he goes above Will Levis. Obviously, this year there's a lot more QB needy teams. I could see someone like Seattle taking him in the late first, early second before Will Levis. See teams trading up for him. He's still in the second round. He's not in the top 10. He's maybe not a first round pick unless someone really wants to move up to the back of the first round, which was talk for Will Levis that someone might move up to get that 5th-year option. If he would have went to the combine, right, his size at 6'5", is going to do well, but he's going to have a poor performance at the combine with his 40 time and his 3-cone drill and all that kind of stuff. He didn't measure well when he did do that stuff. So I do think he goes above Will Levis. Obviously, with Will Levis, the upside is the cannon of an arm. But if you watch Will Levis's tape, his pocket awareness is non-existent. And I think you see Kyle Trask and you go, oh, Kyle Trask is better. Personally, I think if Hendon Hooker wasn't injured, he should have went above Will Levis. Like, I think he's the better quarterback than Will Levis. I think Will Levis should have went.
I agree. I was a big Hendon Hooker fan.
I'm a big Hendon Hooker fan. We were at the combine, and I really liked him, and I wish he would have been able to do something. So I think he goes ahead of Will Levis. I think it's close. I mean, I think someone might sneak into the first round to take him because I think they like his upside. I think Will Levis fell because there wasn't a ton of upside with Will Levis. There wasn't this great college production. When you're talking about a quarterback that threw 43 touchdowns his senior year and 8 interceptions in Kyle Trask, like, that's a staggering number. When we look at someone like Anthony Richardson, who had minimal production in college but had this athletic freak, I think those college numbers really stand out for Kyle Trask, and I think that gets him a little bump and probably gets him into the late first round.
Grace Point says, Kyle Trask with weapons is very dangerous. Check his Florida career, as you were talking about. What does concern me a little bit, you talked about his pocket presence before, and sure, there's not a lot of NFL
tape,
regular season tape to go by, but I just know from like the preseason games, it wasn't like he was oblivious to the pocket, but it did seem at times where it was like, get rid of it, just holding on to it a little bit too long. And then the arm strength, it wasn't like he couldn't throw the ball deep down the field. He just wasn't crazy accurate with it. Like, I remember a couple of times Scotty Miller going deep down the field. So my concern a little bit is the accuracy deep down the field, but maybe that can be subdued with the fact that, as you're talking about with Dave Canales, a little more short, intermediate routes, focusing on the run game. But is there a worry that with Trask at quarterback, the offense could almost be like too plain Jane, too vanilla, where, yes, you're not going to be no risk it, no biscuit the whole time, but you got to throw it a little bit. You got to move the ball down the field one way or another.
You do. And I think he has, right? He has 2 good receivers in Evans and Godwin who can get open down the field, who can make those contested catches. I'm looking at Geno Smith's numbers for last year. 572 attempts. Like, if you put Kyle Trask in, and I think it's going to be a very similar offense because that's where Canales comes from, like, you weren't seeing Geno Smith chuck the ball down the field all that much. Like, I think he only had, 4 or 5 games, like maybe even less, under, like, over 300 yards. Like, Geno Smith was just very efficient. They ran the ball a lot. I see Rachaad White and Cade Otton getting a ton of work. I see it be more of a Godwin type system where he's going to run those kind of slants over the middle. But you still have Evans to take the top off. If you look at Evans and Godwin, they're very much I think they're a better version than Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. If Evans is the DK and Godwin is the Lockett, I think Godwin's clearly better than Tyler Lockett. I think Evans and Metcalf are pretty close. So it's great weapons, and Cade Otton is better than any tight end that Seattle has, whether that's Will Disley or Colby Parkinson or Noah Fant, right? He's just Cade Otton's the better receiver, the better player. So I look at Geno Smith's numbers and go, okay, that's reasonable for the starter for Tampa Bay. And if that's Kyle Trask, like, he could have 550, 575 passing attempts. Geno put up 4,282 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Like, that's not out of the realm of possibility. I think it's probably more towards like 25 touchdowns, probably a few less interceptions. I don't think it's going to be plain Jane. I think it'll be a very efficient, basic football. And it may not be flashy for your highlight reels on Sports Center. It may not be flashy for, NFL Red Zone, but you're going to be, at the end of the year, you're going to go, oh man, Kyle Trask / Baker Mayfield is a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Like, they put up a ton of numbers. We didn't see it from Geno Smith. No one expected it. And all of a sudden he was like, oh, I can't believe Geno Smith is this good. Is Geno Smith that good? Probably not. It's probably a system thing. It's a fit, and I think that system's going to fit. It does fit both Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield. I just think Kyle Trask is slightly better at all those things and protects the ball more.
Yeah, so it sounds like if you're saying the end-all be-all between Trask and Mayfield, is it mainly for you just coming down to the turnovers?
It is. It's turnovers and leadership, and I wonder if Kyle Trask. The good thing for Baker is that he's new, right? So there's no preconceived notions of his work ethic, who he is. The offensive line, the weapons already know Kyle Trask, and either they like him or they hate him, right? And there's probably very little in between. They're probably like, "Yeah, he's okay," or they're like, "Oh yeah, I love this guy." And I haven't heard any reports either way. So if the team is, if Evans, Godwin, some of the offensive line are like, "Yeah, we love Kyle Trask, we love what he does," then that weighs heavy for me in who the starter is. Now Baker has the chance to come in and win that. I just think that that's part of it. So it's interception and leadership. I look at San Francisco. We see guys go, "I'm a Brock Purdy guy," and we have half the locker room going, "We want Trey Lance," and it really split that team. I don't think we see that in Tampa Bay, but I think if we see a bulk of the team rally behind, especially the leader, especially the veterans, rally behind one of the quarterbacks, whether that's Kyle Trask or Baker, I think that's going to sway a lot for the coaches. I wonder if Trask has gotten there in the 2 years he's been there. I haven't heard anything from either side, so we'll see.
Yeah, this is how I kind of wrestle with it because Baker, the chip on the shoulder guy, rah, a little more in your face, but I think while he still plays with that intensity and that aggressiveness, I think he's also learned about himself a lot just through the past couple of years, what he's been through, the trials and tribulations, if you will. He's been humbled because he was a lot more chilled out when he had his initial press conference with the Bucs, but I think he's really fit in right away. I mean, he's been going to Bruce Arians' charity golf event, golfing with a couple of guys. I know he went out with Jamel Dean and two other Bucs on a golf trip. And Kyle Trask, I'm not saying he doesn't get along with any of the Bucs, but what I do know is he's definitely more of the lead by example, quiet type. And that doesn't mean that you can't be a good leader, but I do wonder about that a little bit. And then the quarterback room, was very tight with Brady, Ryan Griffin, even the four-string quarterback, Blaine Gabbert. I mean, there were UFC fights in Vegas that you would see Brady, Mike Evans, Blaine Gabbert, Ryan Griffin too. Who was it there? Kyle Trask. Now, who knows? Maybe Kyle Trask had other obligations, or maybe he's not a UFC fan and he didn't go. But that, I don't know. I have that in the back of my head just a little bit. I hear you on the turnovers, but I think that goes back into the maturity, really, of Baker Mayfield. He's got to know by now you can't do it. Can't throw the football. Because, like, arm strength-wise and stuff, I don't know if I'd give, like, Kyle Trask I
think it's equal.
Yeah, you think it's all right? Yeah, so pretty equal there. Baker. If all things are equal, I do think Baker just brings a little more pizzazz to this team, which is why I personally think he's going to end up being the starter. But we can agree to disagree on that.
I think Baker will be the week one starter. I think it's the wrong decision, but I think he will be the starter. Now, the contract doesn't say that. Like, he got paid backup money, right? His contract is $4 million a year. He's getting paid less than Drew Lock, Sam Darnold, who could possibly be the week one starter for San Fran, Cooper Rush, Brian Hoyer, Mariota, Case Keenum, Mike White, Jacoby Brissett, Jared Stidham. Like, he's behind all those guys in salary. So they brought him in on this, hey, you could be the backup salary, contract. It's not like they paid him to possibly be the starter. Mm-hmm. I think even if Baker is the week one starter, his leash is super short, right? If he goes out and has 2 weeks of, let's say he starts out 0-2 and has, in those 2 games, has basically a combined 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I think I think there's going to be a lot of talk in the media and in the team of when do we switch to Kyle Trask. And I think we'll start hearing that Kyle Trask drumbeat start sooner rather than later. I think you can see week 2, week 3. I haven't looked at the Bucs schedule recently, but
I'll pull it up for you. So what I hate about the Bucs schedule is they actually have a very early bye week. You can see on the schedule here, they have a bye week 5. But I do think because they have a new offense, offensive coordinator Dave Canales, as we were talking about before. While I still hate it, if you were going to say a positive about it, I would say, okay, you can kind of regroup after those first 4 games. You have that bye week. Everyone sits together. Okay, this is what's working. This is what isn't working. What do we still need to iron out? How do we feel about this set and so on and so forth? So it will be a good testing point for how whoever the starter is, how are they doing? How do they look? Should we make a change then? Because it's really difficult after that to just make a change 1 week in or 1 week out. If you want to do another one, week 8 after the Bills.
That's exactly what I was looking at.
Yeah, that's a Thursday night game, so you'd have a couple extra days to ponder and think about that decision. But yeah, it will be an interesting one for sure. Yeah, go ahead.
And not only is it a Thursday night game, so like you get a couple extra days, you're talking, let's say Minnesota, that's going to be a tough one for them. They probably lose that. Chicago's up in the air. Philly, I think, is a loss. New Orleans, I think, could be a win. So you're going to the bye 2-2 or 3-1. Best case, your best case you're 2-2. Worst case, you're 1-3. Detroit's going to be tough. Then you have Atlanta week 7. Then the Bills is probably lost in week 8. They're sitting there on Friday going, we're 3-4, and we have 2 divisional losses. To let's say they lose both to New Orleans and Atlanta, 2 divisional losses. They're going to do what we're doing. They're going to go, oh man, there's just not a better time to make the switch than now, right? We're 6 weeks into the season or 7 weeks into the season. Let's make the change. So it's right. I don't think they make the change by week 4. I think if they had a bye week in week 9, 10, I think that's where I'd see it. But I do think that after the Bills game, right, and that Bills game could be terrible for Baker Mayfield, right? Like at Buffalo, who has a good defense, who has a good second round, but Bills fans, so like he could go out there and put up 3 interceptions and they're like, all right, that's it. We're just moving on to Kyle Trask. I think you'll start seeing the drum beat after the Eagles because I think that'll be a tough matchup for Baker, and I think you'll start hearing Kyle Trask talk starting that week. If they come out and go 0-3 and they're looking at New Orleans, and if they lose that and they're 0-4 going to the bye week, you'll really start hearing Kyle Trask. But I agree with you that week 8 after the Bills, having those few extra days from Thursday to Sunday against Houston, and Houston would be a good opening week for Kyle Trask, right? Like that's not a great. It's not right. You have Houston, Tennessee, 2 meh teams, right? Like that are good but not great, and then you have San Fran, then you have Indy. Like you've got some winnable games there, which just bolsters Kyle Trask's resume. Like if he comes in week 9 against Houston, wins, week 10, Tennessee, they have a decent game. They're close. Maybe they win, maybe they lose to San Francisco, or competitive with, the Colts and Carolina and Atlanta, competitive with Green Bay. They probably lose at Jacksonville. Then they can finish out with 2 divisional opponents. Like Kyle Trask goes, man, I was competitive in all the games I played. So the schedule's not great with that early bye, but I think that week 4 to week 6, and then I definitely think you're right. After the Buffalo game in week 8 is when they could make the change.
There is a fine line between poor play and just figuring things out as an offense. There does need to be that grace period overall. So it's funny, we're looking at the Bills game as that kind of benchmark. I kind of feel that if the Bucs can stay afloat, and after that Bills game would be 7 games, week 8, but with the early bye.
Yep.
If they're at 3-4 or 4-3, I think that's actually a success for the Bucs, because you look at their schedule overall, and you just rattled off some of it, but they play a bad. Well, first of all, their own division is bad in the NFC South.
Yes.
They play a bad AFC South, and the NFC North. Sure, the Vikings won the division last year. Everyone will point to that they had all of these games that were within 1 possession or 1 score, and somehow the Vikings had a great record and then still lost in the first round of the playoffs. You can't tell me the Packers are better with Jordan Love than they were
not at all
with Aaron Rodgers. So I look at this schedule, and Vegas has the Bucs as over under 6.5 wins. If they go to 3-4 or 4-3, they have a great opportunity to build some momentum, because the Texans, obviously not great. I think Tennessee is going to take a huge step back this year. I mean, they're already thinking about trading Derrick Henry. They don't know who their quarterback is. I mean, that's why they drafted one this year. But still, they have a couple guys on that roster. Obviously, San Fran is tough. But you're telling me these next couple of games, Texans, Titans, Colts, Panthers, Falcons, and then a Jordan Love-led Green Bay Packers, it's all about momentum for this team. And I think with Todd Bowles as well, because you can make the case that Todd Bowles is on the hot seat this year if they start struggling. But what if, and the Bucs went 8-9 last year, so let's not kid ourselves. They won the division, but they did not look stellar at all.
No.
What if the Bucs go 9-8 this year and they struggle out of the gate and then they string together wins at the middle to end of the year? Even though they only improved by one game or had the same exact record, because the situation that they're in with just a new quarterback, new offense, that could save Todd Bowles another year. And then you're looking at a team that got better as the season went on. Then you're ready to rock and roll. Because let's not forget, like, this defense is still pretty damn good.
Stacked,
And they kept the Bucs in so many games last year. And then it was Tom Brady saves the day at the end because he was calling the plays because Byron Leftwich didn't have to anymore. Now you got a better offensive coordinator in here. I think they're going to win more than 6.5 games this year. I think truly they're going to go right around their same record as last season, 8-9, maybe even 9-8.
Yeah, I mean, if I was a betting man, which I'm really not, I would probably put the over on 6. Like, I would bet that. I think that's a reasonable expectation. Whoever the starter is has to, and if it's Kyle Trask is a week 1 starter, his leash is just as short as Baker Mayfield's. Like, neither of them have a long leash just because the other guy's so equal. For me, it's going to be turnovers and then quarterback play rate. Yeah, if Baker's just figuring it out and he goes, he has 20, like, I'm looking at week 15, his third week with the Rams. He was 28 attempts, 24 completions, 230 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a great week. Yeah. Let's say he has 25 attempts, completes 19 of them for 180, 190 yards and 1 touchdown. Like, it's not a great day. They probably lose that game, but he didn't do anything to lose you that game. It's when Baker starts losing you the games. I'm looking at his time with the Rams, 3 games under 60% completion, right? Week 16, 17, and week 14. Now, he had week 15 was his best week at 85, but even week 13 was at 62. He finished the whole season as a whole with 60% completion percentage. If his completion percentage is under 60% in the first 4 weeks, I think that's not going to cut it. Bucs fans will be calling for it. So Bucs fans have had it bad, right? You guys had to live through the Jameis Winston 30 for 30 year, right? You had Tom Brady, won you a Super Bowl, great. That was awesome. And then you had Tom Brady last year, was like, he probably retired, then unretired, and probably should have stayed retired, but still won you division. You guys have been good, but like, you guys have suffered through the Jameis Winston era where you guys saw a QB with all the potential, but just make boneheaded plays. And I don't think they want to see that. I don't think the fans want to see that in Baker Mayfield. I think they want to see some upside. I get the impression from some of the Bucs fans I've interacted with that they want to see the future. They don't want this Baker for 1 year and then we figure out next year. Like, they want a guy that they can be around. So I think they're going to be clamoring for Trask if Baker's just okay, because I think that Trask can stick around for maybe Trask is a franchise. Maybe he's a 6-year quarterback for you guys. Maybe they sign him to a 2-3 year extension right off his rookie contract. He's got 2 years left on that. I think that's what Bucs fans want. They want some stability at that position because they haven't had it for a while.
I do want to ask you some fantasy football questions.
All right, let's do it.
In regards to the Bucs, I have one more about Kyle Trask, though, just in general, because what you brought up with the contract, I think is a really good point. If Baker or whoever wins, if Baker plays well and is the starter and wins the job, then all right, you have to re-sign him for more money. I mean, I don't. He's not going to get Patrick Mahomes money, obviously, but I think that's a good problem to have for the Bucs. Kyle Trask only has 2 more years, so if he wins it this year, he still has to prove that he can sustain it as being a good starter for this team. Do you feel at all that the Bucs, and we were talking about this on yesterday's show, maybe mismanaged the overall growth and development of Kyle Trask from the fact that they took him in the 2nd round, and that was a little bit more of a luxury pick. They were just coming off a Super Bowl. They could have addressed a number of different positions in the 2nd round, essentially a 3rd round pick because it's the last pick of the 2nd round. But just, never moved further than 3rd string, wasn't even active on game days until that last game of the season. And, now he's in a QB competition with a guy that hasn't been on this team anymore. Did the Bucs kind of screw that up a little bit?
They did. I don't think it was intentional. I think it was draft Kyle Trask to sit behind Brady for 1 year. Yeah. I think they all expected Brady to be done after 1 year. Then Brady retired. And I think had Brady stayed retired his first time he retired, I think Kyle Trask would have been the guy. I think when Brady came back, obviously Brady's going to come back to your team. You're going to take him. They weren't going to say no, right? They're going to take Tom Brady. He's the greatest quarterback ever. I think that's where it was. They kind of got put in the corner in that situation of, well, crap, we got Brady. Brady likes Blaine Gabbert. Like, let him be the quarterback. Right? Like I said, it's that similar offense. So if something were to happen, Blaine Gabbert goes in, he can run the same plays. We don't have to change things up for Kyle to put Kyle Trask in. They did mismanage it, but I don't think it was necessarily their fault. I think it was the product of Brady going, I'm back. And they were like, okay, thanks. Like, I think they really wanted Brady to move on after 1 year. And Brady coming back, I think, hamstrung them a little bit in the fact that they had to keep things the same. And so that's where they're at. And I think that's why they're there. And there's an opportunity, there's a possibility that the Bucs pack it in this year and just tank, right? Like, that's a real possibility. There was chatter during the draft of them trading Mike Evans. Like, if they go 2-4 and then Kyle Trask comes in and then they're still like 3-6 or something, they can just go, all right, cool, Evans out. Like, they can really pack it in and go young.
I know there was chatter, but it wasn't coming from the Bucs. The Bucs were never going to trade Mike Evans. That was just teams that wanted a wide receiver.
Yep.
Saying, hey, well, the Bucs might be bad this year. Let's trade for Mike Evans. It wouldn't make sense financially for the Bucs. Sure, you get some good draft picks and things like that. But that was never on the table. That was just kind of internet fodder there for sure. And also, like Todd Bowles is in a situation where he can't, unless there's a handshake agreement with the ownership that he's going to be back for next season, he's not signing on for tanking. And this defense is too good. And I think it's tough when you re-sign Levante and you re-sign Jamel Dean on defense. Like, you have a defense that's ready to win now. They just need to, I think this roster in general is ready to win now. They just need to figure out the quarterback situation, and they need better play from their offensive line. So thank you to Alex Hodo for the $4.99 super chat. Alex says, why aren't we playing our recent offensive line picks at their best positions? Luke at right guard, Cody at left guard, Filer unathletic, see the 3-cone, Luke arms too short for right tackle. So to answer your question, Alex, Luke Gadeke played offensive tackle in college, so he's kind of going back to his natural position. And I don't think short arms are the end-all, be-all for offensive line. I think we put too much stock into it. As long as you got that hand placement, if you get your hand placement first, which if you have shorter arms, you're going to get there a little bit quicker. He's going back to his natural position. Cody playing offensive tackle. Yes, he is switching to offensive guard, but he did play there all over at the Senior Bowl. Cody Mock, I'm talking about.
Yep.
And the Bucs have done this a ton of times with their offensive linemen that they draft. Alex Kappa was an offensive tackle. They moved him to guard. Ali Marpet was an offensive tackle. They moved him to guard. He became one of the best guards in Bucs franchise history. Gadeke, they did it. Didn't totally work out, so now he's back at offensive tackle. And Matt Filer, he started his career at offensive tackle with the Steelers, started there, then moved to guard for the Chargers and was starting there most recently. So he's playing essentially his natural position as well. So I appreciate the super chat, Alex, but they're playing their guys in the right position overall. All right, Dustin, I did want to ask you about
let me talk on the offensive line.
Absolutely.
I don't guard and tackle. It's not so much that position. It's left and right side, I think, is the bigger transition for me, right? If you're a guy who plays on the left side, moving to the right side is very different, and vice versa. So I agree with you. Like, Cody Much playing guard, yes, he can play that position. But he's a right side guy. Like, if you wanted to move him to the left side, like, even if you're going, hey, you're a tackle and you're a left tackle, we're gonna move you to right tackle. That's where they get confused. I think guard and tackle is different, but I think it's a less of a switch than it is to move from the left side to the right side or vice versa.
Yeah, fair. And we're seeing it with Tristan Wirfs moving to the left side. He's going to have that entire offseason to do it. He said it's like driving a car on the other side of the road. Like, it's difficult at first, but you can adjust to it.
I went to England on my honeymoon, and it is a weird experience, and it freaks you out, and you don't know what you're doing. And then it's fine when you're by yourself on the road, but then you get in those situations where, like, there's cars coming and you're not sure how close you are, and turns are wonky. Like, so that's what's going to be for them. It's going to be, yes, I know how to block. It's, oh, here comes the blitz. Do I I'm used to taking a step to the right. Now I got to take a step to the left or vice versa, or I got to do these things, or that's where it gets winning. But he will pick it up, right? You do it. I was there for a week in England, and after the end of the week, I was like, oh, I got this. And then I came back, and I was like, oh, I got to relearn this almost. It was wonky. That's great. That's awesome. The only place in Europe I've been to was Ireland. I didn't drive there, though. But I did sit shotgun in where normally I'd be driving. So that was definitely interesting. And
Yeah, Tristan did play a little bit of left tackle at Iowa. He mainly played right tackle, but he did play over there. So a little bit of familiarity. And of course, with fantasy football, Bucs fans want to be familiar with who they should be drafting on their team. And I think with fantasy football as a whole, for years, it's all about getting running backs first. It has shifted a little bit where if you can get a dynamic wide receiver early on, maybe you go with that. But Rachaad White is someone that's been in the news a lot lately. You've been talking about him. Good Morning Football has him as the breakout running back this season. I think regardless of who else is in that running back room, it's going to be a great season for Rachaad White. He's going to split carries with some of the guys, maybe even Sean Tucker, the undrafted free agent out of Syracuse, if he makes this team.
Yep.
But there's very few bell cows in the NFL anymore at running back. But Rachaad White has, I think, a great opportunity to really do some damage as a fantasy football running back.
I completely agree. I was on the Dynasty D-Gens last night, and we had to list our top 12 Dynasty running backs. And I had Rachaad White, I think, at 10 or 11, and they were blown away. But you're right. When you talk about bell cow backs, there are very few left, and Rachaad White has that opportunity right now. He could get 20-plus carries, 25-plus carries every game, especially in an offense that has some question marks at quarterback. Like, he's going to be the guy. He is a good pass catcher. He didn't get a ton of opportunity last year, but coming out of college, he was a good pass catcher. So he can be out there all three downs. They have no one else behind him, right? Keyshawn Vaughn is a bust.
Vaughn, Chase Edmonds.
Chase Edmonds was on like 5 teams last year. Like, he was. Yeah. I think him and Baker Mayfield like just traveled together. Like, oh, let's go to a new team. Why not?
Yeah, let's go out west.
Yeah, they got like every jersey in the league at this point in their locker room somewhere. I do fear that Tampa Bay will sign somebody. I think it might be Ezekiel Elliott. Could be Dalvin Cook. To come in to be that kind of veteran presence, because they are built to win now. So you could see him on a 1-year deal just to kind of get him over, to kind of help push him over the hump, which would eat into Rachaad White's carries. But if he's in that backfield by himself, the volume is there for him for fantasy. He's going off the board as like, I want to say wide receiver most places in the 15s, 20s. Like, I have him top 12. I'm buying him all day at his ADP for fantasy football. He's going to have value.
I tried to get him last year as in a late round. I tried to get him last year in a late round as a sleeper, but someone took him right before I wanted to. So hopefully they don't keep him this year so I can draft him and make him one of my sleepers. I think with the whole Ezekiel Elliott thing, and it's funny because we spoke to the Bucs got a new running backs coach this year, Skip Peete, who was the running backs coach for the Cowboys. So, he knows Ezekiel Elliott better than anyone. And he had a long answer, but he essentially said, I don't think Zeke is a good fit for the Bucs specifically. And I don't want Zeke to come to Tampa Bay. I hope he ends up on a team. But they just released Leonard Fournette. Why would you put Rachaad White in that same situation of a veteran guy, has a bit of an ego? I don't think by any means an ego that's like detrimental or bad for the team. Just a guy that is polarizing. The NFL, everyone knows Ezekiel Elliott. So he's going to get his snaps whether people like it or not. Why take that away? Dave Canales, the new offensive coordinator, is a huge fan of Rachaad White. He said he's a violent runner. Those are the type of runners that I look for. He only had 1 rushing touchdown last year. He had 2 receiving touchdowns last season. So, I think he didn't even get to show his entire receiving prowess and still scored a game-winning touchdown, had more receiving touchdowns than rushing touchdowns. But you let him be the full-time starter with the new and improved offensive line. Let's remember, the Bucs run game was terrible last year. It was 32nd in the league. It was awful. They can only go up from here, and they are clearly dedicating themselves to the run game. I could not agree with you more. I think Rachaad White going to be great this year, fantasy-wise. Let's talk about the wide receivers a little bit. Obviously, it goes down to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Both guys had – Mike Evans, in terms of Mike Evans' expectations, had a down season. The touchdowns were much lower than anyone expected. Still got 1,000 receiving yards. I personally see the touchdowns going back up this year. I just think it was a down year for Mike Evans. And Chris Godwin, the most interesting thing about him is he played a lot of the slot last year, so he racked up receptions because the Bucs would just throw a screen pass to him for no rhyme or reason, not even have blockers in front of him, and just go, all right, break 15 tackles. That's obviously not going to happen all the time. But with Chris Godwin going outside, he's going to get a lot more one-on-one opportunities and can still really thrive in that role. So what's your outlook for Mike and Chris going into this year?
I like them. I think people will be down on them because I think they're down on the quarterback situation. But right, Mike Evans has had 1,000 yards every year of his career, like all 9 years. I think he's still going to get that. I think they'll will that to happen end of the season just to make it happen so he gets 10 years. I love Chris Godwin. He's 27, so he's just at that apex age of wide receivers. People forget, like, he came back from the ankle last year, like, came back week 1, hurt it, missed 2 games, came back.
ACL injury, and then he had a hamstring injury.
Yeah, ACL and hamstring, that's what it was, yeah. You're right, he was fed targets because that was Tom Brady's, he kind of filled that Julian Edelman type of role of, like, I'm just going to catch these little screen passes and scamper up the field. I still see him. He got 142 targets last year. I think that comes down, but I think he's super efficient on his targets. He only had 3 touchdowns. It was a down year for everyone, right? Down year for Evans and Godwin. I think they're values for fantasy football because I think people are going to go, oh, they're old. They're on the way out. They have Kyle Trask or Baker Mayfield, but they're still going to produce. Like, they're still wide receiver 2s for your fantasy team, and they're probably going to be drafted as tail end of wide receiver 2s. I agree with you that Mike Evans' touchdowns will go back up. I think he had 6 last year, 14 and 13 the year before. I think he gets back to that 8-9 range, so he adds a few more touchdowns, and I think Godwin goes from 3 back up to 6 or 7. And then you got Cade Otton, who I think can take some work. The issue for me is there's not a whole lot after Godwin's and Evans. You still have Russell Gage, who I like, but I don't love. Like, he had it really didn't flash. He missed a good chunk of time. And then there's nobody, right? There's Kalen Geiger, there's Devin Tompkins, David Moore. They drafted Greg Palmer, Trey Palmer in the 6th round. Like, they lack depth, and they're built to win now. So my fear is that things don't go well, and then they just, at the end of the season or trade deadline, the Bucs go, crap. Like, we're built to win now, and we're not. Their defense is super old and experienced and built to win now. And that's where, like, they might have to make that hard call in October, the trade deadline, and go, man, we're just not going to get there. The only benefit is that they're in a super easy division to win, so making the playoffs is something, right? And that's what matters to the owner, right, is making the playoffs, because that's an extra game of revenue. So, but I think this next offseason, I think you're going to see a total teardown and rebuild.
Yeah, we shall see. I mean, because the NFC South is so bad, the Bucs could be contending, even with the losing record, could be contending late in the season for the NFC South title. But yeah, we talked about Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Can't go wrong with a great duo like that. Can never have enough great wide receivers, just like you can never have enough Celsius energy drinks. You heard me talk about where to find them if you want to get a single can, but if you want to get them in bulk, which I would very much recommend because they have so many different flavors, go to Amazon, do the subscribe and save, start buying them in bulk over at Amazon with the subscribe and save. Get the variety pack, because variety is the spice of life. Just set it up where you can have it sent to your house or apartment every week, month, yearly, whenever you want. Just make sure you're drinking Celsius energy drinks, the official sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast. All right, before we wrap things up, Dustin, so fantasy football, usually you get a defense. There are leagues that do individual defensive players. I have not done that just yet, but if I were going to play in a fantasy football league with an individual defensive player, where do you look first? Do you look for a linebacker, an edge rusher who's obviously going to rack up the sacks? What's the right way to go with that?
If you play IDP, which I do not, but I know a bunch of people do, the current way IDP is generally scored, it's linebacker heavy, right? Because tackles are worth 1 point.
Right.
So you want to pick up a linebacker. So you're looking at Shaquille Barrett, you're looking at Levante David, Carlton Davis, who are just going to rack up tackles. I'm not sure there's a edge rusher for Tampa Bay that's going to get a ton of sacks, right? Like, it's just not a skill set for them. So you definitely want to start at linebacker, and then you want to look at corner, right? Because they're still going to get tackles. They have an opportunity for interceptions. But linebackers really rule IDP leagues for fantasy.
Interesting. All right, cool. I'll make sure I remember
that's
that
the way it's, and that's why IDP hasn't grown a ton, because
I don't like it personally.
I don't like it either, because for me, I don't really love defenses or kickers because they're just a one-off and it's just a throwaway position. And all you're doing with IDP, All you're doing with
Kicker's
IDP is you're creating 3 more throw positions because it doesn't matter because there's a bazillion linebackers out there. So I just need someone who's going to tackle a bunch. There are some companies. So my buddies over here at Front Office Pros, they're actually working on a system to like have a better IDP system. At Dynasty Pros, we have a different scoring system that kind of balances out. So your top linebacker is equal to your top cornerback. That's going to be equal to your top defensive end. The problem is with the 1, 2, 3 scoring the way it is tackles rule the day and linebackers get the most tackles.
Right. Yeah, that seems to be how it goes. So yeah, you can end up getting a linebacker that gets 15 tackles in a game, and it just kind of skews everything.
And he could have 15 tackles and your defensive end can have 3 sacks, but that 3 sacks doesn't equal to 15 tackles. So it's like 3 sacks in a game is amazing stats, but it's just not worth as many points.
Right.
Yep.
As a team defense, where would you rank the Bucs?
Fairly high based on their schedule, right? Like they aren't playing now. They have a tough early schedule, so I probably wouldn't draft them. But the way I do defenses for fantasy is I like to stream them. So I look at 3-week chunks. So I go, who's got the best first 3 weeks? Okay, then we find someone who's got 3 good matchups. So I think when we looked at the schedule, you're looking at that middle of the road where they're playing that Houston, Tennessee, Carolina, right? Like you're playing these that middle of the schedule. Like that's where I'm thinking you could pick them up. And I try to look at like, can I get 3 weeks out of them, and then I have to find an option? Can I get 4 or 5 weeks? Because then I don't have to make other roster moves. But I think they're going to be a sneaky good defense because they are experienced. They have the veteran players. They're probably going to be in those close games because they're going to play a bunch of mediocre teams. And that's what you don't want is a team that's always behind, because then they just get run all the time and there's just not the opportunity. You don't want to play, like, you don't want to get someone in the AFC West, right, where they're playing the Chiefs and the Chargers, the teams that put up a ton of points. It's just not what you want. So like Raiders and Chargers and Broncos are out. So I think they have a really good shot to be a good team defense for fantasy.
Yeah, make sure you look that up. And after you look up the Bucs rankings, check out pewterreport.com. And please follow us on our social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at Pewter Report, and then our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe to this episode and all of our videos. We got a ton of content that comes out all the time. And, of course, 4 podcasts per week. So make sure you check it out. Dustin, thank you so much for joining the show today. Make sure you check out all of his work at Dynasty Pros, Fantasy Football. You had a giveaway, though, with the Buccaneers. Please tell computer people about that.
So I'm going to step out of the camera so you can see it. So I was at the NFL draft, and I got this beautiful banner, which shows the alternate reimagined logo for the Buccaneers. And I actually got one for every team. So this is the giveaway I'm doing. All you have to do on my Twitter is it's a pin tweet. You have to follow me and then retweet it, and you'll be entered in the drawing to win it. And I draw on Monday. And for the Pewter Report listeners and watchers, you get 1 entry for following and retweet. If you go on and comment who you think is going to start, Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask, I'll give you an extra entry just for Pewter Report listeners.
That's awesome.
So you guys can get 2 entries. I will say right now, there's only I think 15 people entered. So you have a really good shot at winning. He runs till Monday, so you got a couple days. I know this will come out and people will be listening. So get on there, follow me, retweet, and then comment which quarterback you think is going to start, and you'll get 2 entries. And then I'll just spin it on a wheel and notify the winner and ship it out. So
as Shaggy says, love that logo. Yeah, make sure you go and take advantage of that. Get 2 entries just for
2 entries.
Watching the show.
This is the only time I'm going to do 2 entries for this one, and I do one every week. So I did Ravens last week. This is a banner. This was a 100-foot banner that was on a fence at the draft, and they were everywhere, and they basically got torn down and thrown out. This is probably a one-of-one thing. Like, I don't know many of these that survived. I did accidentally cut off you can see there's a little tape back there to tape on the feather, because when I was cutting it out, I had backwards. I thought it was part of the Saints logo because it's white on the back.
Yeah.
It's pretty much, it is big. It is like 3x4. It is a big thing, but you can mount it on a piece of cardboard. I just have it on a stick right now hanging up there. But it might be a one-of-one thing. I haven't seen any of these on eBay or any of these memorabilia sites, so this might be a one-of-one thing out there for Tampa Bay fans. If you're listening to this and you're a fan of another team, which I'm not sure why you're listening to this, maybe you're just a fan of me, I will be doing team giveaways every week for the next 20-some weeks. I got pretty much every team left. I have a couple of my giveaways to some friends, but Buccaneers fans, this is probably my favorite one. This skull with the thing, and it's probably the most badass looking one there is.
Absolutely.
So all you have to do is you follow me, retweet, and then comment who you want, and you'll get 2 entries. I'll do the winner on Monday. I'll spin the wheel, and I'll notify the winner, and then ship it out. So
awesome. There you go. One last time, just where can they follow you and find all your work?
Sure, it's at the D Unit. So THEDUNIT 13 on Twitter. So the D Unit 13 on Twitter, or you can just search Dustin Ludke and you'll find me on Twitter as well.
All right, there you have it. Thank you again for joining the show. Appreciate everybody that watched and listened and commented to it. For Dustin Ludke, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks. Wait, Ludke or Ludke?
Ludke, that's all right.
Ludke, I'm so sorry.
It happens.
For Dustin Ludke, I'm Matt Matera saying thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next week for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Have a great weekend. Out.